For I will pour out my spirit on the house of Israel. So he's no longer going to hide. So did he ever show his face to Israel themselves? He actually did. When he first showed up in the cloud with lightning and everything, it says that he wanted to show his face to them, but they were so scared of his voice alone that they said, no, Moses, you go ahead and do the conversation and talking with them. We'll stay over here because it's a bit scary. And so they lost that chance. They denied that chance to have a relationship, a face-to-face relationship with God, which we see right here means the pouring out of the Holy Spirit. And again, it says the house of Israel. So maybe you're saying, I'm just going to say it for you. That's for the house of Israel, Manuel. That's a promise for them. But we know by our faith that all the promises given to Abraham have been given to us. We have inherited every single promise given to the nation of Israel because we are of Abraham's seed by our faith. So therefore, the pouring out of the Holy Spirit is for us. And therefore, if the pouring out of the Holy Spirit is seeing God face to face, then we can see God face to face. But why do we want to see God face to face? And what are some of the things that can distract us when we actually have that chance and we see our relationship on a daily basis? We are seeking God. Our eyes are on him. But what can distract us away from that? And I want to show 3 different areas that can be a distraction or we can call it a temptation. And what to watch out for, because it's so important that if we're seeking God's face, we're seeking it for one reason. And that's intimacy with him. So through him pouring out his Spirit on us, we will be able to continuously see his face. The amount, he knows what we can handle. Because if you read other stories of when people experience God, you got Gideon. He fell to his knees. He thought he was going to die, but he didn't. You got Isaiah when he was in the temple and the train of God's robe came into the temple. He thought he was going to burn up because his eyes saw the Holy One. None of them died. Well, actually they did. They did die to themselves, but God chose to keep them alive for his purpose and used them. So he kind of purified them, and the Spirit of God came upon them to do the work that God wanted them to do for that time. So he knows what we can handle right now as we're growing in our faith. But we must keep our eyes on him and not on the distractions. The first one is we're going to walk in the footsteps of Jacob. Jacob, if you know anything about him, he was a twin. He came out second, holding on to Esau's heel down here because he wanted to be first. His name actually meant that, holding on to the heel, but it also meant, I think it was deceiver or deception is what his name meant. Because all through his life, he stole his brother's birthright or by conning him into, if you want a cup of soup, not the ones that we have now, it was homemade soup, then sell me your birthright. And then his mother, as he got older, his mother helped him deceive his father into getting the blessing that the first son was supposed to get. So all his life, he was doing all of these deceptive things. But one thing that he was always trying to do through all this, and God saw this, was he wanted God's blessing. The whole reason why he deceived his brother, the whole reason why he deceived his father was because he wanted God's blessing, because he knew that it was for him. And he might have went about it the wrong way. He wasn't perfect about it. But God knew where his heart was, to the point that when he ran away from home, was sent away from home because he was scared that his brother was going to kill him. And then he got deceived in this land because he went and saw this beautiful woman and told the father, hey, I'll work for you. Let me know what I need to do so I can marry your daughter. He said, oh, just work for me for 7 years. And so 7 years pass, and then the wedding happens, and he wakes up the next morning with the other daughter. He's like, what happened? He's like, oh, you have to marry that one first. He's like, well, but I want to marry your other. Okay, you got to work for me for 7 more years. 14 years, 2 wives later, and a bunch of kids, about 11, and he was deceived himself. And God said, it's time for you to go back, make amends with your brother. I want you to go back to the land that I promised to your people and your descendants. You know? And so on the way back, he had an encounter with God. And I want to read that. It's in Genesis 32, 22 through 33. It says, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the fjord of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, how many know that God can overpower him, but he chose not to? And there was a purpose behind that. So after he realized he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. Man, that's a long wrestling match. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask me my name? Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. I think with Jacob's quest, it was Jacob's quest for God's face that started the change. And then he received the blessing because he learned through this quest that it was all about seeking God's face and receiving his blessing. That's what everything, his energy, everything he did was all about. And I think for us to even start this quest of seeing God face to face, we have to realize that, hey, it's not about being perfect. It's not about cleaning up all the edges, you know? It's a process. We must start to seek God's face now in this quest with God. We don't need to wait. So that's the first distraction or temptation, that people, I'm waiting. I'm standing still until I'm perfect, instead of saying, no, I'm walking with God, keeping my eyes on him while he's perfecting me. Then we got the second footsteps. These are the footsteps of Elisha. And this is a cool one. This is one of my favorite ones. Because Elisha's waiting patiently determined his experience with spiritual breakthrough. And only integrity and passion could grant this request that Elisha asked. What did Elisha ask? If you go to 2 Kings, if you want to, 2 Kings 2:9. Now, Elisha was the prophet Elijah's protege, Padme from Star Wars, if you want to call it, and followed him around. I guess it was about a year long, actually, if you read the background of it. He followed Elijah for like a year. And then one day, all of a sudden, you know, they're traveling around together, and every town they go to, people are coming out and saying, hey, Elisha, you know your master's leaving you today. He's like, shut up, get away from me. Every town they went to, someone came up to him, and he tried to ignore them all. And then finally, Elijah turned around to Elisha and says, hey, look, you know, I'm going to be taken away from you today. You know, is there anything that you want to ask me for? And I'll see if I can do it. And so Elijah, this is his request. It's 2 Kings 2:9 through 10. And he says, when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elijah, tell me what I can do for you before I am taken from you. And then he said, let me inherit a double portion of your spirit. You have asked a very difficult thing, Elijah said. Yet, if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise not. And so, all Elisha had to do was keep his eyes on his master the whole entire time. And he was like Elijah's shadow. I mean, I don't even think Elijah could go to the restroom on his own, because Elisha was there every single second. In fact, Elijah a few times tried to say, hey, I got to go send